You're listening to Music Tectonics.
Welcome back to Music Tectonics, where we go beneath the surface of music and tech. I'm sometimes your host, but today I'm your co-host. This is Dmitri, Vietze, the CEO and founder of Rock, Paper, Scissors, the music tech PR firm.
And I am Tristra Yeager, your also occasional host and strangely enough co-hosting with Dmitri for the first time in a long time.
I mean, it's like there's been a pandemic, but we've been doing stuff remotely, so I don't even know why we haven't done this.
I know. It's just kind of like, you go do this thing now. And I'm director of strategy at Rock, Paper, Scissors. And then we have a third co-host.
I am Shayli. I'm the conference planner for Music Tectonics, and I'm so excited to be here today.
Woot woot. Is this your first podcast, Shayli?
So. It's a debut.
This is my first podcast. Yes, this is my debut podcast. I'm in a closet in Florida, so I'm super excited to be here.
We're dropping an
Regardless
NFT.
Of location, yeah.
We're going to drop an NFT to commemorate this amazing event. All right.
Amazing.
Well, you know, it's funny, and we used to do a little bit more of these news roundups, but if you are the kind of music person that talks about the industry the way that sports fans talk about teams, this is the episode for you. This is a Music Tectonics news roundup. We've got a bunch of articles. We just kind of pay attention to the industry as a PR company. We're often looking at the media to see how stories are unfolding and how we can insert our clients into the mix. But we're also looking for insights about the industry and sharing articles with clients and with our community. And so we've dug in and found a real kind of a cool mix today. And the first one, we'll just dive in if you guys are ready for this.
Let's go for it.
The first one's from the Wall Street Journal. It's a piece by Neil Shaw called "Music Fans Have a New Problem: Too Many Concerts, Too Little Time." It's kind of an interesting problem.
Yeah, I think it's a very unexpected problem, even though we should have all expected it. And it's coming at a time when there's a lot of desire, I think, on the part of fans to go out and hear music. But then it's also really hard to catch all the stuff you've been wanting to catch. And then there's also, it's such a strange moment because on the other hand, you have touring bands. And while some of the bigger names, I'm sure it actually matters to them as well. But for indie bands who've got a really thin margin on touring, the gas prices, inflation when it comes to food costs, et cetera, have been really putting a damper on their spirits. So the fact that fans might be overwhelmed with choice at the same time as artists are kind of struggling to make ends meet on tour, this could be a really weird moment, right when we're all excited about things restarting.
Well, and it feels like it's related to the hurry up and stop, hurry up and go, stop and go aspect of this entire pandemic because, you can't just start touring again. You have to plan it. So you have to start to think about, well, when is the all clear sign going to happen? Then another variant came along and so forth. So there's a lot of people who jumped in a little too soon and then they ended up pushing their tours to 2023 now because they got kind of burned. They got scared. And it's funny, the article starts off by quoting a 20-year-old student about all the hard choices to make between these concerts. I'm thinking, wait a second, the pandemic's been going on for 2 years now. That student didn't have this problem pre-pandemic. So it's like, for some people, this is the first, for a key target market for live music, this is the first time that they've had this amount of choice as well, which is kind of interesting. But the article just goes on and talks about, whether this is a new renaissance in live music or, whether this overbooking of concerts is now creating a problem on the sales front, It's that interesting dilemma.
Yeah, I think definitely it's probably causing a problem now, but, we're just fresh. We're not even out of the pandemic yet. We're just kind of maybe at the tail end. So, I think it's super expected to feel this surge, in 2022 and even 2023. But I think we could maybe anticipate it dying down a little bit or a return to some sense of previous normalcy.
Yeah, it's going to be so interesting to see, even just this summer, what happens, Shayli, you and I are just back from South by Southwest, so we got a taste of being at shows, seeing people in person, industry folks as well. Super, super fun and exciting. Feels so good to be back at shows. But we even saw, some festivals last year kind of come out with a vaccine card policy or test policy and didn't end up being super spreader events either. So I do think it's looking like that aspect of it is mostly covered. I mean, if another variant comes, knock on wood.
Interesting, yeah. It was dramatic.
Right. Knocking on wood connected to mics.
I was going to say the knock heard around the internet there.
But hopefully we've got that aspect of the safety part covered. So now we just have to deal with the economic, the fluctuation between supply and demand of concerts.
Yeah, it was kind of amazing how many studies were done on, disease transmission in live settings. So it's kind of cool because that's really important work, not just for COVID, but for any future, like, your city's having a flu outbreak. Do you need to change policies in live venues? I don't know. It could be useful in general, but it'll be very, very interesting to see how artists fare through this time.
Yeah, another thing that was pointed out in that article was, Tristra, you chatted about how gas prices have gone up and, other prices for the artist. But this article also talked a little bit about how the prices of the tickets are going up. I think it said prices have gone up like 14% since the end of from 2019 to 2021, which, that's something else to consider when, me as an attendee is going to a concert. Like, you have to choose. You can't go to all of the ones that you maybe want to go to because they're also rising in price.
Yeah, definitely. So let's jump to our next story, which is there's one last thing I want to say about this, which is I think we've got on the schedule an interview with Fabrice Sargent from Bands in Town. And I think that'll be really interesting to hear from his perspective because he gets a macro view on all the concert discovery and how much touring there is and, across multiple ticketing platforms and venues and venue owners and promoters. So stay tuned for that coming up in a few weeks as well.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see their point of view over the next couple of months and look what they're seeing on Bands in Town.
Yeah, they've got early indicator information. Now, if we go back digital, which we talk about a lot here, Tristra, you found a really interesting article from somebody I had not seen before, a guy named Michael Beausoleil. It was a Medium post, 10.medium.com.
Yeah, that's an on Medium sort of magazine that covers digital and internet culture and tech.
His article was called "Why Are YouTube Views Tanking? Creators are complaining about YouTube views going down, yet more people are joining the platform. What's going on?"
Yeah, it was a weird article because no offense, Michael, I don't mean your article is weird, but it was an article that pointed out something really unusual that I haven't really heard anywhere else. And that was that views for what's traditionally been really successful categories on YouTube, like music videos and certain kinds of vlog-esque creator content of the more traditional, it's funny to call a YouTube video traditional, but the more traditional kind, they're falling in terms of views and channels are really suffering. At the same time, there are more and more users on YouTube. So what are they watching is the question, because they're clearly not watching the stuff that used to be super successful. So he gives some great examples about Adele's music videos and just how, you went from Hello to, oh my God, I can't even think of her latest release. Sorry, Adele.
Easy on Me.
Easy on Me. There we go. That and how it's barely, it's garnered a fraction of the views. I mean, it's still doing pretty darn well.
260 million views, but not a billion
that it got in 70 some odd days. So so it's something interesting is going on. And, music has been such a solid category on YouTube for so long. And I'm basically one of its biggest. It's great because it drives, they're short, music videos tend to be as long as a track, maybe a little longer. And so that means they're cheap to host and people really like them and they're great. It's easy to place ads against most music, right? It's not going to have some super crazy political content that's going to make an advertiser lose their cool.
and music also, not only because it's short, but because it's catchy, people like to watch more than once.
Yeah, that's true. It's really hard to watch like your favorite Minecraft guy play
the same game.
Exactly, or do like the cake icing challenge.
But if your Minecraft guy is playing for, a 3-hour video, that was also what the article chatted about was, a huge portion of views on YouTube have come from the gaming industry. Not only the gaming industry, but YouTube has movies out there now and some other TV shows. And so while people are still consuming the same maybe amount of time of media. They're not consuming the same amount of videos, because previously they were, watching several different 4-minute music videos, but now they're watching a 3-hour Minecraft video, or a 2-hour Harry Potter movie or something like that on YouTube.
Or just judging by my children's behavior, which is always, I have a sample size of 2, so bear that in mind. But, they watch these like little meme videos, and they all have the same format, and they all have the same music, and they go over and over again, like with like Mr. Incredible and all sorts of weird stuff.
But is that YouTube or is that TikTok?
That's YouTube. And they're about like 1.5 to 2 minutes long. And there's just a gazillion of them. So that's what they like. They like to watch stuff like that, as opposed to, or like weird old ads from the 80s. Like anyway.
Yeah. So Michael Beausoleil, you should have interviewed Tristra's kids. But I think, going off of what Shayli said, videos are getting longer. YouTube is pushing, allowing for that, but also kind of optimizing for that, including pushing the TV streaming model as well. So, if YouTube was losing market share to, say, Netflix, Disney, Apple TV, HBO Max, they're thinking in terms of, well, there's a long-form opportunity there too. And there's nothing wrong with long-form content on YouTube if they're either if they're getting paid for subscriptions or getting ad revenue, because, YouTube will interrupt your longer video with more ads. But then another interesting thing it brought up, and not to move too quickly if you guys have stuff to say about the long form content, but was that people are getting used to music streaming services outside of YouTube. And so if they were using YouTube for free and they age out of the free version and they want to start paying for ad-free content, they might jump to Apple Music or Spotify or Tidal or something like Amazon or something like that. And so then their YouTube viewing changes as a result. And
it'll be interesting to see if this trend continues, or is it going to settle out as like a certain number of people migrated to DSPs versus YouTube. The other thing that's interesting, and this will make this a very interesting future for TikTok, video times are expanding. So I think it's up to... Help me here. Help me here, young people.
I don't know. I don't use TikTok. I'm sorry.
I think it's like part of me wants to say an hour, but that sounds so crazy, but like really, really long TikToks, which will be interesting to see how do people use that. Is it going to be like Instagram Reels where you're kind of forcing people into it, but they're not really all that into it? I don't know. It's going to be interesting.
I am interested in Instagram Reels. I don't have TikTok because I say it'll take too much time, but then I get sucked into Instagram Reels. I think kind of it's not a surprise maybe that YouTube has gone to more longer videos because of these emerging platforms like Instagram Reels and TikTok, and you can find your shorter form videos on, like you said, your sons watch memes or like those kind of things on YouTube. And, maybe your sons are still on YouTube, but like a lot of those people are finding that kind of content on a TikTok or on Instagram Reels, and they're, they don't need YouTube for that kind of content anymore.
Yeah, I do. I think it's interesting that this author did not mention TikTok a single time in this article. And I think if there's views getting lost, we know that, the teenage set, the early 20s and beyond now at this point, obviously, but certainly in those places, TikTok's growth is huge. So of course, they're the biggest kind of infringer on YouTube, in my opinion. YouTube also has YouTube Shorts. My 13-year-old son, whenever you talk about, well, actually, until a couple of months ago, whenever you talk about TikTok or Instagram Reels, he's like, yeah, but YouTube Shorts has that too. That's growing as well. But now he does have TikTok, and I am seeing him more often on TikTok as well. But it was interesting that didn't come up in the article at all.
Yeah, it was very interesting.
But there's, as Mark Mulligan, who spoke at our first Music Tectonics conference in 2019, said, you see these trends that are downward trends or upward trends, but it's not a switch that flips all at once. So there's constantly these different sized audiences. Radio is shrinking, but it hasn't shrunk. It's not gone. Commercial radio is still in existence. There's still lots of ads getting sold there. But of course, every move Spotify makes to pull people away from radio and do the podcast thing and integrate podcasts with music. Sirius XM dug into traditional terrestrial radio as well. So these things change over time, and then eventually you have like a variety, a very diverse set of options. And so that's what we're seeing with the creator economy of video and social video and video sharing and video streaming. I mean, this whole article has nothing to do with live streaming, but YouTube live streaming is competing with Twitch and Instagram and all the other things that we've talked about here too. So, did we hit it all on the YouTube shifts in data about viewership there?
I think we hit it and we can quit it.
All right. Well, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we're gonna talk about Web3. We'll be right back.
Eleanor here. Tickets are on sale now for the 2022 Music Tectonics Conference. Music tech innovators will gather in person October 25th through the 27th by the beach in the Los Angeles area. Join us at a special early bird rate, $249. The first 25 to register get a super early bird rate, just $199. Get to musictectonics.com to snap up your conference ticket at a great price. Your ticket gets you in to 3 days of programming in Santa Monica, California. Join us for panels, keynotes, exhibitors, a startup pitch competition, networking, and connecting. We've selected offbeat venues in easy walking distance of each other and the beach. If you're not getting my newsletter, head over to musictectonics.com now and sign up. You'll get updates on the music tech and innovation programming we're planning for this year's conference, and more. See you in California this October.
Okay, we are back. Super fun talking about the live industry, about some shifts in YouTube viewership, and we want to jump into the Web3 portion of stuff. There was this article in Think Tank that I think kind of talked about those shifts that we were just talking about with YouTube and other video platforms, but now with the Web3 stuff. It was called Web3 Casting, Music Companies Preparing for the Next Revenue Boom. Is it Eamon Ford?
I think that's how you pronounce his name. Mr. Ford, let us know if we got it wrong. But
so that article came out a couple of weeks ago on Think Tank.
Yeah. And what do you...
Yeah. So, well, here's how it starts. As the major music companies continue to develop their Web3 strategies, Eamon Ford explores the significant potential for revenue generation and long-term industry growth. And he captures quotes from some of the major labels, significant companies, kind of about how they're thinking and talking about this stuff as well. He says, at the start of 2021, few people outside of a niche tech bubble really knew what NFTs were. By the end of 2021, pretty much everyone in music knew what NFTs were, or certainly had heard of them and could at least pretend to know what they were. The boom in revenues related to NFTs, as well as the boom in the sheer number of them being created and sold in 2021, was what convinced the music business at large that Web3 should be key to its future. And, it's cool that he starts out this way because previous, quote, disruptive technologies didn't get early adoption by the music space. But I also think that we are at this moment where there are early adopters and creators and people that are on this side of the business. But at the same time, there are industry folks who are saying, oh, we need to jump on this. We need to pay attention to this. So he quotes some major label folks that are sort of hinting at what's to come, that they're not inherently sue first, sort it out later at this point, but more like, oh, shoot, this is a shift that's happening. And it's kind of significant because it is kind of seen as a direct-to-fan new medium in a way.
Yeah.
And so to have labels say, okay, how are we going to address this is a really important piece. And the NFT Web3 stuff is not as easy to put out as a record at this point, right? There's some complicated technology that you kind of have to get up to speed with.
The interesting thing too, I think you really hit the nail on the head, is that this is all being driven so far. I mean, there are some, advertisements for hires at Spotify and stuff. Like there is in-house activity, but a lot of it's being done through partnerships. So signing deals with different companies, creating these relationships early on. And that is a huge sea change, right? On one hand, you used to have the tech disruptors who were like, put the product out and get the licenses later. And then you had the labels that were like, sue first, ask questions later. And it was a really, unsustainable situation. And now it's like, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years have gone by, however many years, many, many years. And we are seeing the second a new technology that looks promising comes online, like the folks are starting to I mean, at least on the at the corporate level, people are getting really interested in and trying to build relationships fairly early. The other thing is, I think we're looking at a bit of a hard fork, to not be too obnoxiously cute about it, in the way people are imagining Web3 in music. And on one hand, there's this sort of grassroots like maker community that wants to make really cool things, that wants to run it themselves. They want to control it themselves. They're really interested in the actual technology and how to master it and how to make the most of it and build community and do neat new things that'll let people do other really cool new things. So I'm thinking about the RACs of the world and folks like our folks like Hi-Fi Labs and all the DAOs out there that are really trying to do something innovative from the grassroots. And then you have these sort of bigger corporate plays. And it'll be really interesting to see what happens, because I mean, this is, I think, I don't know. I think you could make the argument that digital music had a similar thing. Like you could just like put your MP3 on a blog and people could download it. What's going to happen with these two different worlds? Are they going to inform each other? Are they going to diverge? Like it's kind of interesting.
That just made me think of something that I hadn't thought of that's different about NFTs and MP3s. When you say, you could put your MP3 on a blog and download it, it's not, you can't do that with NFTs, right? You have to invest something in them. So you're obviously investing something in the recording of your tracks or something like that. But then to upload an MP3 is not really expensive, but to mint NFTs, you do have to make an investment. Yeah.
And then, there's almost like a built-in value chain of a sort with it. And there's a different control than you would have over, like you have no control over the MP3 format nor over the blog platform that you use. But the ideal with these decentralized technologies is that the technology allows you that control, and it's sort of just baked in that, no matter what other layers you may put on top of it, the essence is this kind of thing that you can control and own completely. It will be really interesting to see how all this plays out.
And one of the things that interested me about the article, and it's worth checking out on Think Tank's blog, is that I guess it's Think Blog. I keep saying Think Tank, but it's their blog, so I guess they call it Think Blog.
Think Blog, yeah.
Was that it starts off with talking about how Warner Music's CEO Steve Cooper's talking about this, and how Lucien Grange from UMG is talking about this, but it also quotes Dean Wilson, deadmau5's manager, who we just had on the podcast not too long ago. And so it's interesting to hear how somebody like Dean Wilson will say, this is breaking the industry model. This is great. This is the best thing for artists. And then to hear these major labels also saying, yeah, we're leaning into this. A little less specificity around some of it, but like Steve Cooper from Warner said, labels and publishers will be more important than they are today as the world becomes more and more complex, which is sort of implying it might seem like this is easy to do, but there's other stuff to do as well. Harder stuff for artists to execute.
For sure. Yeah. I think the most exciting thing for me in this space is just how new it is. We talked at South by a lot about how, everyone was skeptical of Napster and like that came out and stuff. And now, Web3 and NFTs have been introduced. And of course, everyone's really skeptical about them because they're new and no one, there's a lot of articles about there and there's a lot of buzzwords around NFTs and stuff. But I just think it's really exciting and also maybe a little bit intimidating to the labels. Like, oh, wow, artists are going to get this direct like fan engagement, and where will that leave us? Like, are NFTs or something like that going to cut out, the label from the artist?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's like this pendulum that we keep seeing in the industry as new technologies emerge. A lot of times the technology comes from outside of the traditional label and publisher world, and either that has to be fought sometimes around copyright and licensing and royalties, or adopted quickly. And it seems like there's a little bit of a shift. It's definitely intimidating, like you described, Shayli. And we're hearing, one of the things he points out in the article is sort of like, if you look at the hiring at some of these labels and publishers, they actually have Web3 related positions that are merging. He talks about primary wave, kind of taking advantage of Web3 and having a specific strategy around that as well. But it'll be interesting to see if the labels and publishers move fast enough to continue to sort of own that market share of monetization of recorded music versus monetizing IP via Web3 is, everyone's getting in on it, from like Warner Brothers putting out like Matrix NFTs. I just saw that Paramount is putting out like Star Trek ones where you can like make your own starship and mint it as an NFT. So all these companies they're sitting on these huge vaults of IP, like random IP bits and pieces, are using Web3. And at the same time, it's like, this is supposed to also liberate artists in a really direct way, kind of like that, a little bit of that libertarian Creative Commons kind of vibe. So it's almost like we have vibe collision here. And how will it get sorted out? Maybe it'll get sorted out in 1,000 different ways. I think it will.
Yeah, it's just interesting.
Yeah. And we also have this article from Axios by Brady Dale called Web2 Giants Playing Catch Up on Cryptocurrency, which, just as this is happening in the record industry, like you're saying, Shayli, there's all these, these other platforms, the Facebooks and the Googles and social Twitter, and then the Reddits, the eBay.
Microsoft, all sorts of people trying to figure out what to do with this thing.
That article is a fun, quick, bullet of each one, what they're doing, and kind of,
a little snarky.
It is a little snarky.
That's okay.
Twitter made a special emoji for Bitcoin forever ago. It says recently it has offered a tipping function in Bitcoin. Plus, users who want to show off a favorite NFT can verify they own it. And then eBay makes NFTs available to buy on the site, but don't look for any of these to be the next Bored Apes.
Oh man,
everyone just wants in. They just are jumping. It's so new, and everyone wants to get in because they don't want to miss out.
The biggest dig is at the end of the article, towards the end, I think, where they talk about the most epic crypto flameout in Web2 award, without a question, goes to the company now known as Meta, which launched Libra, changed it to DM, and then finally sold it for parts in February.
And now they're back to Zuckbucks, but I think that's an in-app currency, not a standalone. I think I don't know if that's the actual official name, but I've seen it covered everywhere as Zuckbucks. And just here's another fun fact. I saw this in the New York Times. Apparently, everyone calls Zuckerberg lovingly, he says, refers to him as the Eye of Sauron, lovingly. I promise we will never refer to you as the Eye of Sauron, lovingly, Dmitri.
Thank you.
Rock, paper, scissors. Okay, all right, moving on.
And that's it for this episode.
Exactly.
Bye, Tristra.
I think, I'm just about to be thrown into the pit of the Dark Tower or something.
Anyway, one last article that really gets into the weeds, and then we'll move on, was from Andreessen Horowitz, which, it's so interesting. They write really compelling contextual context about some of these industry shifts. Sometimes you might read some articles and say, there's a lot of buzzwords in there, but they're actually explaining them if you stick with it. This one was called the NFT Mint, quote, Sweet Spot, Data on Early Decisions by Darren Matsuko, which is actually a summary of research that Darren did. Do you remember what this one was?
Yes, I do. And it's from, Andreessen Horowitz has a sort of standalone media outlet now called Future, and they do publish a lot of interesting either essays, think pieces, or some really technical stuff like this that involves research into how should you mint? How many NFTs should you mint? How should you approach these things? So I just was thinking it was super interesting how nuanced we're getting about this, and quite quickly, trying to we talk to a lot of people who are trying to figure this out in the music space, and pricing is a very interesting question, and trying to understand the motivations of a potential buyer. Are they speculators, which there are a lot of speculators in the space, and you kind of have to acknowledge they exist and work with them? Or are they fans? Are they people who are just really want that I don't know, NFT, and they have $50 and they want it, because it means something to them, or it helps them get a t-shirt, or they get to go to the VIP party at some, their local concert or whatever. So all these nuances are really interesting, and I'm kind of glad that people are digging in and talking about them so early. I feel like they're a bunch of good tools evolving for folks who really want to work in this space, rationally.
I think that's what's also really exciting is that the possibilities are endless, and NFTs are a whole new revenue stream. Like, they're not there to compete with your recorded music, right, or, they're not there. And I think that sometimes that can be a little intimidating. But yeah, like, NFTs are going to allow for so many new opportunities for artists, and it's exciting.
I think you're getting to a really good, interesting part that doesn't often get talked about in a more conversational way in the music space, which is that this is not just a switch of formats, which is what we've seen in the past, from vinyl to 8 tracks to CDs to cassettes to downloads to streams to NFTs. NFTs is sort of going beneath the surface of the format itself, which is where I think you're talking about the excitement comes from. And it doesn't, and Tristra, as you're saying, which I think this article brought up, it also questions whether there's a uniform price, because in each of those format shifts, there would be a pretty quick consensus about what is the format and how much does it cost. And Shayli, you're saying the format is not always the same. Like, it doesn't compete with listening to music or a track, and each one does, one of them might feel like a collectible trading card type experience, but one of them might be a VIP experience, and one of them might be more metadata that you didn't even know you wanted until it comes in the form of playlists, or, like live show playlists or videos or things like that. So I think that's where people are maybe moving a little quicker on it. It's like, it's not a shift to a format, but it's like the new market. It's a shift of commerce. It's a shift of the way that people are going to buy and sell music.
I mean, it's almost like when it comes to things like commodities, I was talking with someone about this a couple months ago, where it's like, you used to just sell the pork bellies, then you sold what the pork bellies will sell for, right? So like, you can put whole new layers of financial instruments, which, you may like or dislike, but what NFTs are doing is they're adding an additional commerce layer that is completely different from the layer below it. And it's connected, but not completely.
Totally.
Yeah, and I just think that people also are kind of intimidated on like how to market your NFTs. I was reading an article that talked about, like, previously, you would reach out to the store and be like, hey, I'll pay you extra to put my CDs on the front, in the front of the display case or whatever. Right. And now it's like, well, how do you market an NFT? Like, what audience do I reach? Where do I find that audience?
A Discord, apparently.
Maybe some Twitter. You can tweet about it.
So to wrap up on this article, they politely put a TLDR at the end, which is awesome. But low mint prices correlated to higher return multiples for early backers. So this is, whether these people are speculative or not in terms of investors, but the fact that if you had lower mint prices, it allowed for these higher return when you resold it a second time for the early backers. It's like, it's kind of related to the marketing, actually, in a sense. Like, if there's enough value still left there for them to make when they resell it, they might jump in quicker. It also says that many of today's most vibrant secondary markets had very little in primary sales revenue. So they didn't make a ton of money.
That's such an interesting point, yeah.
But then later, it really took off.
And we're hoping, I think that's the hope for a lot of folks with music NFT projects, is that they can jumpstart that secondary market and really get that going, because that's really where the exciting revenue streams for artists and producers and for the marketplaces themselves is going to be. So,
do we want to say anything else about Web3? We didn't do much metaverse talk here.
Oh, we'll save the metaverse for some other time. Meanwhile, I'm just going to take my disembodied torso out of the metaverse. Move on.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, our friend and past speaker and podcast guest Will Page from Tarzan Economics did a really interesting piece where he reanalyzed some old copyright value data. We'll get to that after this break. Whoa, the ideas are flying fast on this episode. If you want to follow up on anything we're talking about today, we've made it easy. Head over to musictectonics.com and find this episode on the podcast page. You'll see show notes full of links and a time-stamped roadmap of the conversation. We're not responsible for internet rabbit holes you tumble down in the process. Now, let's get back to the conversation. All right, we're back. So Will Page from Tarzan Economics, former chief economist from Spotify and regular speaker at Music Tectonics conferences and events and so forth, recently, just a couple weeks ago, put out a piece called "Global Value of Music Copyright is Bigger Now Than It's Ever Been." And he kind of looks back at some data to compare where we are now in 2020 with where we were in 2001. And if you look directly at the data, luckily he has a nice little graph in there. The global value of music copyright in 2001, he says, was $28.3 billion. And 77% of that went to labels and 23% of that went to publishing. And then for 2020, the global value of music copyright was $32.5 billion, and 65% of that went to labels and 35% of that went to publishing. And this is super interesting because it's been a constant battle ever since streaming has been defined to become the primary revenue stream for recorded music about what's the right share between labels and publishers, because the rules changed suddenly, and then kind of laws had to follow suit after it already took off. So I'm curious about your takeaway from that.
I think Will is really explaining why people got excited about investing in catalogs and buying up catalogs, both really notable ones and ones that were a mixed bag. And it's so interesting. Now, there's some talk about there being a slight cooling in that activity due to interest rates rising worldwide. But but I think Will is saying there is just huge long-term value. And, will this continue? Was this just like a paradigm shift and now it's like those shares are going to stay the same, or are we going to keep seeing? I wish Will were here, because I'd like to ask him about his, though he may not speculate on mic, but it would be fun to hear his take on why and what he sees for the future. Like, is this something we can project into the future, or is this just something that happened and we'll just have to wait and see? Or it's super, super interesting. And I think, folks like Bruno Guez from Revelator have said that he believes that it's going to continue. Like, there's way more value in music IP that is sort of yet to be fully embraced by the industry. So there's a lot of unreported revenue there, or revenue that's kind of trickling away somewhere, or revenue that could be better. I don't know. So I think we've just gotten to the point where we can really start to see these things. Because poor Will had to like dig around, and it was like going to some used bookstore or something, and like digging up reports from like the 2000s that were in hard copy, and like there's some pretty. It was like the crate digging of music economics here,
which is pretty cool because Shayli, you got to hang out with Will at South by. He is a music crate digger as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
He's a great DJ. He's got some great mixes on Mixcloud as well. So it's interesting to think about that. He went from crate digging to data digging. Maybe
you have to get him back and have him do some deep cuts for sure. Weird statistics from the music industry you didn't know you needed.
Yeah.
Awesome.
When will the streaming services be able to do unified mixes with AI from our friends at Super Hi-Fi that mixes together data and tracks?
This track has been played 75% more thanks to anyway, it could be interesting.
This track brought the publishers 33%.
That's what I want. I want the like real-time stats like recited between songs. Oh man, if you played this song 1,000 more times, the artist would get beep. Yeah. Anyway.
By the way, I mentioned that was written by Will Page, but also with Shannon Nitroy, to give credit where credit is due.
That's awesome.
Will probably hear this and tell us what he thought of this coverage.
Yeah, that's good. I welcome more Tarzanian commentary.
Oh, absolutely.
So I wanted to ask, we've got, maybe just to wrap it up, there's something that's a little bit lighter. Mm-hmm. And that was, I saw an amazing blog post from a guy I don't know, whose name is, I think you have the article in front of you there.
Oh, was this the Artificial Truth?
Yeah, the blog is called Artificial Truth. I mean, I don't read it regularly. I think I picked it up from a newsletter, but it has a wonderful list of all of, his name is
Julien Voisin?
Julien Voisin.
Okay.
And he has a list of like incredible Here, let me just frame this by saying artists are going to be super artistic and metadata has to deal with that. So the article is called Horrible Edge Cases to Consider When Dealing with Music. So he basically lists all of the incredible difficulties we have from, the police's synchronicity having 36 cover variations to album names that are just symbols to the fact that there are about 50,000 groups around the world who go by the name Emperor. So it's everything from like kids music to black metal. So it's just a really, really fun read. And it's definitely there for anybody who appreciates,
the challenges of metadata.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's basically like like something that people who work with music metadata could take to a party and just be like, well, if you want to know what I do for a living, look at this list of totally incomprehensible symbols that make up this artist's name and every single track on every single album they've ever put out. So
yeah, tracks that don't have names. I think there was Aphex Twin had some tracks, some albums with some of the tracks had names, some of them didn't.
There's
tracks that had like 20 or albums that had 20 tracks that had several tracks that just had silence for multiple seconds, but no explanation of why or, which ones had music and which ones didn't.
Or the artist that has a name and every album has that same name and every track on every album has that same name and they have several albums. It's just like, again, if you're looking for a way to lighten your mood, maybe not if you work in metadata because this might make you cry, but for the rest of us, it's a pretty fun read, and we'll definitely post links to all these articles in our show notes. But it's good times.
Yeah, definitely.
Wacky music metadata.
Well, that was a blast. So great to have you on the show together. What am I talking about? You're on the show more than me these days. So glad to have me on the show.
It's great to be together and to get to talk about all this fun stuff.
Absolutely. Give people a little bit of a window of what it's like at the Rock, Paper, Scissors office. And Shayli, your debut. Thanks for joining us.
Yay.
Yeah, definitely. It was kind of fun. I can't wait to be back.
Thanks for listening
and don't
to
forget
Music Tectonics. If you like
just
what you hear,
made our
please
debut
subscribe
announcement
on
of our
your favorite
2022
podcast
conference happening
We have new
October
episodes
25th
for you
through
every
27th
week.
in Santa Monica,
You
California.
can dig deeper
She's got to
into
plug it.
all
She's our
our
conference
episodes
planner.
with the show
Good
notes
job.
at musictectonics.com.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for listening
While
to the
you're there,
episode. We'll be
look
back
for
with
the latest
another one
about our
soon.
annual conference. Sign up for our newsletter to get updates or get the Music Tectonics app for music tech news. Everything we do explores seismic shifts that shake up music and technology the way the Earth's tectonic plates cause quakes and make mountains. Connect with Music Tectonics on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and find me, Dmitri Vietze, if you can spell it, on LinkedIn. Bye-bye.
You're listening to Music Tectonics.